This is something that I'm genuinely waiting for. But we are already starting to see the cracks start to emerge, because obviously recently we've had the whole, what it's become, I'm calling the Spain debacle, where a lot of Brexiteers and not Brexiteers, but Brexit supporters who were somehow expecting that their holiday homes in Spain, where they could flit off whenever they wanted to and stay for as long as they liked, are suddenly now finding they can't do that anymore. And they're blaming Spain. And my response to you, if you see anyone doing this, jump in on those comments and just saying, no, it wasn't Spain, this was Brexit. But then again, you know what you were voting for, right? That should be your response. Nothing more than that. Just remind them, this isn't Spain's fault, this is Brexit's fault. And hey, you've told us countless times this is what you are voting for, right? But the big bust up, I think, is going to be coming in the Conservative Party, because we've gone over numerous times how there are now factions, multiple factions within the Conservative Party, literally waiting to have an absolute royal rumble. And I think that the next Conservative conference could be quite interesting on that, because as we've said before, the current Conservative Party was taken over by essentially far-right free market fundamentalists. And the problem is, a lot of the Conservatives that got pushed out were they were still right, don't get me wrong, but they were very more centre-right or just slightly right. And there were a lot of David Cameron's people, think of them like that. And they were always very, very pro-business. Indeed, many of the ones who supported Brexit because they were sure they would be staying in the customs market and single market and customs union, because they knew, and as we've said before, the Brexiteers know how much damage this is going to do to the economy, but they don't care because they've got other ideas in plan. Because to them, yeah, the economy shrinks, but that means that their slice of pie that they have gets bigger. So in the long run, they don't care. But a lot of these Conservatives who have small and medium-sized businesses, or who have constituencies who are big backers of the Conservative Party, who are medium to small and sized businesses, they are going to get inundated very, very soon. And the pandemic has put a lot of that pressure off these businesses. But now they're trying to sort of start to get back to some sort of normal and reality, but they're finding that their European market, where they used to have virtually no hindrance at all, there was nothing, it was completely free trade, completely frictionless, and now they're finding that there are now barriers to trade. There's all this friction, which is costing them extra money. It's costing them more to import stuff and more to export stuff as well, and they're losing customers. This is going to have a huge knock-on effect, and that's what we're getting into today, because small businesses in the UK are not happy. So before we jump into that, please do remember to hit that like and share button, and of course down below there is a link to my Patreon page as well as a one-off donation link, and as always, thank you all to those people that do support me that way. So here we are. So this comes from The Guardian, and the title is, "We've been sold a dud. Small firms suffer decline in post-Brexit exports." So, small businesses have reported a marked drop in exports to the EU as another company bemoaned the post-Brexit nightmare for delivery delays and increased cost. The Federation of Small Business, or the FSB, a lobby group, said that 35 of the 132 exporters it had surveyed had temporarily suspended trade with the EU or stopped it permanently. 1 in 10 of the exporters surveyed said that they were also considering giving up trade with EU customers. Smaller businesses have been badly affected by the overnight change in trade rules on the 31st of December, with new paperwork and a rush to secure delivery space in widespread delays and resulting in extra costs. UK exports to the EU fell by 41% in January, according to government figures. It's a nightmare, said Sharon DeCosta, the managing director of Freight Films, a Bristol-based producer of judo movies, including highlights of tournaments held at the International Judo Federation, which also supplies martial arts kit. Half of the company's business was in Europe before the pandemic and Brexit, but orders for suits from a Belgian customer that previously took 2 days have now had to wait as long as a month to arrive. One option available to large companies is setting up a warehouse in the EU in order to fulfill those orders for customers in the bloc. However, this would represent a major cost for smaller companies and would mean they would have to hold more inventory to be able to offer the same range of products. It's not viable for us to sell to our agents or distributors in Europe, said DaCosta. We're far too small a company for that to be viable. With trade between the UK and the EU is dominated by large companies, exports are important as a source of business for smaller to mid-sized enterprises. About 1/5 of smaller British businesses exported in 2019, according to the government's figures. And although that represents a decline from roughly 24% before the financial crisis in 2008. So think about that. The financial crisis we were still suffering from, and we were on the road slowly back. But before we could even recover from that, it's just a disaster show on constant track. And now this is just a train that is just crashing completely, and it's just amusing to watch because apparently the passengers knew what they were voting for. The government-backed British Business Bank calculated last year that the smaller businesses accounted for 1/3 of UK exports in 2018, or around 200 billions worth of goods and services. Fighting Films, which has 8 permanent employees, has been forced to consider rerouting shipments of judo suits from a factory in Pakistan directly to retailers in Europe, which would harm profits. It will all be trade that won't go through us, said Del Costa. Imports costs have also risen from the EU, with the end result likely to be price rises of about 5% for British buyers on some products such as judo mats. We've been sold a dud, she said. If it weren't for COVID, people would be shouting from the rooftops. Matt Griffith, a spokesperson for the British Chamber of Commerce in the Southwest, said members had experienced short-term costs, plus what looked like permanent disintegration in their competitive proposition due to higher admin and paperwork and shipping costs. Smaller online retailers and food and drink companies had been particularly badly affected, he added. Some businesses face an existential threat, for instance. The export of live mollusks, such as cockles and clams, has become near impossible, though while tough standards for food and animal exports have meant that the trade has fallen dramatically. Mike Cherry, the FSB's national chairman, said smaller businesses faced incredibly demanding and unfamiliar paperwork. He added that 3 months on from the end of the transition period, what we hoped would prove to be the teething problems are in danger of becoming permanent systemic ones. That was always going to be the case, and these things aren't going anywhere. While larger firms have the resources and bandwidth to overcome them, regardless, small traders are struggling and considering whether exports are even worth the effort anymore. And yet, to a small business, being able to export to the EU as easily as they had it was a massive boost, an absolute massive boost. There has been a couple of times on this channel where we have gone over small businesses and their effects, and they've said we were able to grow as big as we did and as fast as we could because we had access to the EU's single market. And like I say, you know, it might be a bit of a cliche, but the UK is a nation of shopkeepers. We are a nation of small business owners. And not having access to that, the EU single market, is going to be absolutely damaging. Because now everyone's in the same market. And yes, there's that massive competition, but hey, there was always that EU export market that you had, which did provide really, really good numbers, as we've just been seeing there. And they're not the only ones that we've gone over for the past 3 months who have said, we're in trouble. And she's right. If it was not for the pandemic, the calls to put us back in the single market and customs union would be absolutely deafening. But trust me, we are going to see this as things start to get back to normal, as Boris starts to push people to get back to work. And it's not just going to be things like that, but, you know, the service sector, whether you do marketing, insurance, things like that, computing, data storage, you know, all these companies are suddenly going to find it's a lot harder to sell into Europe and deal with their European customers. And that is going to have a huge knock-on effect. But that's all we've been saying since the very, very beginning of 2016. Of, hey, if you leave the EU, these are the consequences. If you leave the single market customs union, these are the consequences. But according to the Brexiteers, they knew what they were voting for. So, as always, we'll see you all next time. Please do remember to hit that like and share button. And also, down below, there is a link to my Patreon page, as well as my one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can buy me a coffee. And thank you to all those people who do support me on those two ways, or whether you just click that like and share button. As they say, every little helps. So, see you all next time.